I refused to help my pregnant sister after years of being ignored by my family. Now they're calling me selfish, but the truth is more complicated than they think. I'm Sarah, 28F, and I've always felt like the black sheep in my family. My parents, Tom, 55M, and Linda, 53F, have 3 children, me, my older brother Jack, 32M, and my younger sister Emma, 24F. We all live in the same city, but our lives couldn't be more different. Growing up, our family dynamic was complicated. My dad worked long hours as a construction foreman, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark. Mom was a stay-at-home parent, but her attention was always divided unequally among us kids. Jack, being the firstborn and only son, was the apple of our parents' eyes from day one. He was athletic, charismatic, and seemed to excel at everything he tried. I have vivid memories of our living room mantel crowded with his trophies and medals from various sports. Every weekend was filled with his games or meets, with our parents cheering from the sidelines. I, on the other hand, was quiet and bookish. I loved reading and spent most of my time with my nose in a book. I did well in school, but my academic achievements never seemed to garner the same excitement as Jack's athletic ones. When I brought home straight A's, my mom would nod and say, "That's nice, dear," before turning her attention back to planning Jack's next tournament. Emma came along when I was 4, and she quickly became the baby of the family. She was a fussy infant and a challenging toddler, demanding constant attention. As she grew older, she struggled in school and acted out frequently. This meant that my parents' focus was split between celebrating Jack's successes and managing Emma's difficulties. I learned early on to be self-sufficient. By the time I was 12, I was making my own lunches, doing my own laundry, and basically taking care of myself. I started babysitting for neighbors at 14, eager to have my own money and a reason to be out of the house. High school was a turning point for all of us. Jack got a football scholarship to a prestigious university, and our parents were over the moon. They threw a huge party, invited the whole extended family, and couldn't stop talking about how their son was going to make it big. Meanwhile, I was quietly applying to colleges on my own. I had good grades and some decent extracurriculars, but I knew we couldn't afford much. I applied for every scholarship I could find and eventually got a partial ride to a state school. When I announced this at dinner one night, my dad grunted, "Good for you," and immediately changed the subject to Jack's latest football game. Emma's high school years were turbulent. She started hanging out with a rough crowd, skipping classes, and coming home late. My parents were constantly being called into the principal's office. They spent hours arguing with Emma, grounding her, and trying to get her back on track. It was exhausting for everyone, and I often felt like I was watching it all from the outside. I threw myself into my studies in college, working part-time jobs to cover what my scholarship didn't. I rarely went home, using work as an excuse. In truth, being home made me feel invisible. Jack would visit with grand stories about his college adventures, and Emma's latest crisis always took center stage. After graduation, I landed a job at a marketing firm in the city. I worked hard, earned promotions, and eventually saved enough to buy my own small house last year. When I called my parents to share the news, my mom's response was, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did you hear Emma's thinking about taking some community college classes? We're so proud of her for turning things around." I've tried to maintain a relationship with my siblings, but it's been challenging. Jack is now married with 2 kids and has a successful career as a physical therapist. He's always been kind to me, but we don't have much in common. Our conversations are usually brief and surface level. Emma and I were close as kids, but we drifted apart in our teens. She's had a series of dead-end jobs and rocky relationships. I've tried to offer help and advice over the years, but she often dismisses me as being too perfect to understand her struggles. Now, Emma's pregnant. She's been dating this guy, Ryan, 26M, for about 6 months. From what I've gathered, he's unemployed and lives with his parents. But my family thinks he's great because he makes Emma happy. My parents are ecstatic about becoming grandparents, and have been talking about nothing else for weeks. Last week, my mom called me out of the blue. Her voice was tight with stress as she said, "Sarah, we need your help. Emma's having some complications with the pregnancy, and the doctor wants her on bed rest. Your father and I are going to be staying with her to help out, but we need someone to look after the house and take care of Emma's dog. We were hoping you could move in for a few weeks." I was stunned. After years of barely acknowledging my existence, they suddenly wanted me to put my life on hold for weeks? I explained to my mom that I had a big project coming up at work that could lead to a significant promotion. I simply couldn't afford to take that much time off right now. My mom's reaction was immediate and harsh. "I can't believe how selfish you're being, Sarah," she snapped. "Family should always come first. I thought we raised you better than this. Emma needs us, and you're just thinking about yourself. What kind of aunt are you going to be?" Her words hit me like a slap in the face. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. I reminded her of all the times I'd needed them, the school plays they'd missed, the graduation they'd barely acknowledged, the housewarming they'd skipped. I asked her when family had ever come first when it came to me. The line went quiet for a moment, and then my mom said in a cold voice, "I'm very disappointed in you, Sarah. I hope you'll reconsider and do the right thing." Then she hung up. Since then, my phone has been blowing up with messages. My dad sent a terse text saying I needed to step up and help the family. Jack called and left a voicemail, his voice a mix of confusion and disappointment, asking why I was making things difficult. Emma hasn't said anything directly to me, but she posted a vague Facebook status about finding out who your true friends are in times of need. The post has dozens of sympathetic comments, including several from my parents and other relatives. I feel like I'm going crazy. Part of me wants to cave in, to finally earn their approval and be seen as a good daughter. But another part of me is angry and hurt, wondering why I should sacrifice my own goals for a family that's never seemed to care about them. Am I really being selfish here? Should I have agreed to help out, even though it would cause major problems in my own life? Or am I right to stand my ground after years of being treated like I don't matter? I'm torn between my ingrained desire to please my family and my need to prioritize my own life and well-being. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Your comments gave me a lot to think about and helped me gain some much-needed perspective on the situation. After my argument with my mom, I took some time to cool off and reflect. While I still felt justified in my anger, I realized I didn't want to completely sever ties with my family. So, after a week of radio silence, I decided to reach out to Emma directly. I sent her a text asking if she'd be willing to meet for coffee. To my surprise, she agreed almost immediately. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near her apartment. When I arrived, I barely recognized my sister. The usually vibrant and rebellious Emma looked pale and tired, her eyes rimmed with dark circles. As we sat down with our drinks, an awkward silence fell between us. It had been so long since we'd had a real conversation that neither of us seemed to know where to start. Finally, I asked her how she was feeling. It was like a dam broke. Emma burst into tears, her whole body shaking with sobs. Between gasps, she started pouring out everything she'd been holding in. The pregnancy wasn't going well. There were complications that put both her and the baby at risk. Ryan, who had seemed so supportive at first, had freaked out when things got tough. He'd left her 3 weeks ago, saying he wasn't ready for all this. Our parents had been trying to cover for him, telling everyone he was away for work, but the truth was he'd blocked Emma's number and disappeared completely. As she talked, memories from our childhood flooded back. I remembered a much younger Emma coming to my room late at night, crying because she'd failed a test or had a fight with her friends. Back then, I'd always known how to comfort her. When had we lost that connection? Why didn't you tell me any of this before? I asked gently. Emma's answer hit me hard. I didn't want to bother you, she said, wiping her eyes. You've always had everything so together. Your job, your house. I was embarrassed to admit how much I'd screwed up. Again. I was stunned. All this time, I'd felt like the family failure, the one who was never good enough. I'd never imagined that Emma might see me that way. We ended up talking for hours, really talking, for the first time in years. Emma told me how she'd always felt like she was living in my shadow growing up. While our parents were focused on fixing her, she felt like she could never measure up to my achievements. This was why she'd rebelled so much as a teenager. It was easier to be the bad kid than to try and fail to be the good kid. I shared my side too, how I'd felt ignored and taken for granted, how I'd worked so hard for approval that never seemed to come. We both realized how much miscommunication and misunderstanding had shaped our relationship over the years. By the end of our talk, we'd both cried, laughed, and promised to try and be better sisters to each other. Emma apologized for the Facebook post, admitting she'd only done it because our parents had pressured her to show Sarah how much we need her. As for the situation with Emma's pregnancy, we came up with a compromise. I couldn't move in full-time as our parents had wanted, but I offered to come over on weekends to help out and keep Emma company. She was grateful for even this much support, saying it would be a relief to have someone around who wasn't constantly fussing over her like our parents. When I told our parents about this arrangement, they weren't thrilled. Mom sniffed disapprovingly and said, "Well, I suppose it's better than nothing." Dad grumbled something about young people these days not understanding family responsibility. But to my surprise, Emma stood up for me. She told them firmly that I was doing what I could and that they needed to respect my boundaries. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to me. Since then, Emma and I have been texting regularly. I've been going over to her place every weekend, helping with chores and just keeping her company. We've started having movie nights like we used to as kids, laughing at old comedies and sharing a tub of ice cream. There's still tension with our parents. They make little comments sometimes about how I could be doing more or how Jack would have moved in if his wife would let him. But Emma and I have started presenting a united front, supporting each other in a way we never have before. As for Ryan, Emma has decided to file for child support once the baby is born. I've offered to help her find a good lawyer when the time comes. She's nervous about it, but I can see a determination in her that I don't think I've ever seen before. There's still a long way to go in healing our family dynamics. Years of miscommunication and hurt feelings won't be resolved overnight. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Emma and I are rebuilding our relationship, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we can create a stronger, healthier family bond, not just for the baby's sake, but for all of us. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and the situation has taken some unexpected turns. Emma is now in her 3rd trimester, and our weekend sister bonding sessions have continued. We've grown closer than we've been since we were kids, often staying up late talking about everything from our shared childhood memories to our hopes and fears for the future. About a month ago, during one of these late-night chats, Emma dropped a bombshell. She confessed that she'd been thinking about putting the baby up for adoption. The idea had been growing in her mind for weeks, but she'd been afraid to voice it. As Emma explained her thoughts, I could see the conflict in her eyes. She talked about how unprepared she felt for motherhood, how overwhelmed she was by the idea of raising a child on her own. She worried about finances, about the baby's future, about her own ability to provide a stable home. "I love this baby," she said, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "But I'm not sure loving them is enough. Don't they deserve better than what I can give them?" I was surprised by Emma's maturity and self-awareness. This wasn't the impulsive little sister I remembered. This was a woman grappling with an incredibly difficult decision. I told Emma that it was a big decision and that she should take her time to think it through. Over the next few weeks, we researched adoption agencies together, read stories from birth mothers and adoptive families, and discussed the pros and cons of different options. However, when Emma finally worked up the courage to broach the subject with our parents, all hell broke loose. Mom and Dad were furious. They accused Emma of being selfish and irresponsible. They insisted that they would help raise the baby and that adoption wasn't necessary. "We're a family," Dad thundered. "We take care of our own. You can't just give away our grandchild." Mom was equally upset, alternating between guilt-tripping Emma about abandoning her baby and making grand promises about how they'd handle everything. "You won't have to worry about a thing," she insisted. "We'll babysit whenever you need, we'll help with expenses. You don't need to do something so drastic." Emma called me in tears after their fight. She felt torn between her own doubts about motherhood and our parents' expectations. Their reaction had shaken her resolve, making her question whether she was making a huge mistake. I decided it was time to step in more actively. I invited Emma to stay with me for a week, away from our parents' influence. During this time, we had long talks about her future, her goals, and what she really wanted. We made pros and cons lists, we looked at her budget, we even visited a local adoption agency to get more information. By the end of the week, Emma had made her decision. She wanted to go through with the adoption. "I want this baby to have the best life possible," she told me, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "And right now, I don't think that life is with me." When we told our parents, they didn't take it well. Dad refused to speak to us, stomping out of the room and slamming the door. Mom alternated between crying and yelling, accusing me of turning Emma against them and threatening to contest the adoption. That's when I made a decision that surprised even me. I told Emma that if she wanted to go through with the adoption, I would support her fully, including financially and legally if our parents tried to interfere. "You're sure?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. "Sarah, that could get really expensive. And Mom and Dad, they might never forgive you." I nodded, feeling more certain than I had about anything in a long time. "I'm sure. This is your decision, Emma. Not theirs, not mine. Yours. And whatever you decide, I've got your back." This led to a major family showdown. Jack got involved, initially siding with our parents. "Come on, Emma," he pleaded. "You can't just give up. We'll all help out. It'll be fine." But after a long talk with Emma, hearing her reasons and seeing her determination, he reluctantly agreed to support her decision. "I don't like it," he admitted. "But it's your choice, sis. I just want you to be sure." Currently, Emma is living with me. We're in the process of finding a suitable adoptive family, which has been an emotional roller coaster. Emma is clear about wanting an open adoption, where she can have some level of contact with the child as they grow up. Our parents are still not speaking to us. Mom has tried calling a few times, always with a new argument about why Emma should keep the baby. Dad hasn't said a word to either of us in weeks. Honestly, I'm not sure if our relationship with them will ever be the same. It's been a stressful time, but I'm proud of Emma for making a decision that she feels is best for her and the baby. And I'm proud of myself for finally standing up to our parents and supporting my sister when she needed me most. As difficult as this situation is, it's brought Emma and me closer together. We're finally acting like real sisters, supporting each other through thick and thin. Whatever happens next, I know we'll face it together. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and so much has changed. Emma gave birth to a beautiful baby girl 2 months ago. Despite all the planning and discussions we'd had about adoption, when the moment came, Emma decided she wanted to keep her daughter. Update 3. Continued. The day Emma went into labor was chaotic. I rushed her to the hospital, my heart pounding as I tried to remember everything from the birthing classes we'd attended together. Emma was scared but determined, squeezing my hand so hard I thought she might break it. After 18 hours of labor, Emma's daughter came into the world, pink and screaming. The moment the nurse placed the baby on Emma's chest, something changed in my sister's eyes. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Sarah, I can't do it. I can't give her up." It was a shock to everyone, including me. We'd spent months preparing for the adoption, meeting with potential families, and making plans. But seeing Emma hold her baby for the first time, I understood. The connection was immediate and profound. Emma named her daughter Lily, after our grandmother. Over the next few days in the hospital, I watched my sister transform. The uncertain, often rebellious girl I'd grown up with was replaced by a fiercely protective mother. She devoured every piece of information the nurses gave her, determined to do everything right for Lily. Our parents, upon hearing that Emma was keeping the baby, did a complete 180. They showed up at the hospital with armloads of gifts, tears in their eyes as they begged for forgiveness. Emma, exhausted from labor but radiating a new kind of strength, laid down some firm boundaries. "I love you," she told them, "and I want you in Lily's life. But it's going to be on my terms. No unsolicited advice, no undermining my parenting decisions, and absolutely no mention of Ryan or pressure about finding a new partner. Can you accept that?" To my surprise, our parents agreed. It seems the prospect of losing their daughter and granddaughter for good finally made them realize they needed to change. Dad gruffly promised to do better, while Mom nodded tearfully, reaching out to gently touch Lily's tiny hand. As for me, I found myself in the unexpected role of favorite aunt. Emma and Lily moved in with me after leaving the hospital, turning my quiet house into a whirlwind of baby gear, midnight feedings, and more love than I ever expected. Emma plans to move out once she feels more settled, but for now, our arrangement is working well. I've taken some time off work to help Emma adjust to motherhood. It's been exhausting but incredibly rewarding. Watching Emma grow into her role as a mother, seeing her confidence build day by day, has been amazing. And Lily? Well, I never knew I could love someone so tiny so much. Jack has come around too. He visits regularly, often bringing his own kids to meet their new cousin. He's been a great support, offering advice from his own parenting experiences and often babysitting so Emma can rest. Ryan made a brief reappearance about a month after Lily was born. He showed up at our door, claiming he'd made a mistake and wanted to be part of his daughter's life. Emma, showing a strength I didn't know she possessed, told him that he'd lost that right when he abandoned them. She's proceeding with a child support case, determined to ensure Lily's future is secure. As for our parents, they're trying. They still slip up sometimes, falling into old patterns of criticism or unsolicited advice. But they're making an effort. We've started having family dinners once a month. They're still a bit awkward, with moments of tension, but they're gradually improving. Last week, Dad actually asked me about my work, showing genuine interest for the first time in years. Looking back on the past year, I'm amazed at how much has changed. Our family isn't perfect, and we still have a lot of work to do in rebuilding trust and communication. But for the first time in my life, I feel like we're actually becoming a real family. Emma and I have talked about how this whole experience has changed us. We've both grown so much. She's embracing motherhood with a maturity I never expected, balancing Lily's needs with plans to finish her degree. I've learned that it's okay to let people in and to ask for help sometimes. Lily is the unexpected joy in all of this. Her smiles light up the room, and her giggles are the best sound I've ever heard. Watching her grow and seeing our family come together for her sake gives me hope for the future. It's not the outcome any of us expected, but sometimes life's biggest challenges lead to the greatest rewards. We're taking it one day at a time, learning and growing together. And for now, that's enough.